Hello, and welcome to Encora Global Devweek 2023. My name is Kim Lantis, Dojo Live producer and host, as well as a member of Encora's business development team. This session is going to be all about autonomous versus centralized product engineering. Now, scaling remote product engineering teams can be achieved in two distinct approaches, autonomous or centralized, both of which can be greatly beneficial when properly implemented. Here to discuss the pros and cons of each approach, to identify when to use which or one versus the other, and of course to detail how agility and effective collaboration and tooling are critical for success, is Mike Coen, CTO at Teletracking Technologies. Good to have you here, Mike.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and present.
Yes. So Mike, you are a results-driven professional with extensive experience in leading people and project teams, as well as implementing, overseeing, and administrating all aspects of the technology and projects behind it. So we're ready to learn from you. But before you do get started, we'd like to remind those who are watching today that you're free to use the comments, of course, for anything that you like, agree with, disagree with, have learned today, or of course have questions as well. And with that, it's a pleasure to learn from you today, Mike. So take it away.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Mike Coen, and my time with working with Encora, I've learned a lot about how to try to manage teams appropriately based off of the use cases that we at Teletracking Technologies have had to deal with. And having Encora as a partner has been great for us. It's been the most flexible of all partners that we have, and we're really pleased to give the opportunity to discuss how we leverage and best leverage Encora as our partner. So I'm going to go into a little detail, but before I do that, a little bit of background on myself and about the company. I'm Mike Coen, as previously stated. I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer at Teletracking Technologies. I have undergraduate degrees in electrical engineering and computer engineering, and a master's in computer engineering. I spent most of my career as an engineer. In the latter part of my career, I moved into leadership roles. I've been with Teletracking since 2016, so I've been approaching my 7th year with Teletracking and role CTO. We've been a client of Encora. We're in year 9. We're approaching year 10 before we know it. So we've been around for all the growth that we've seen with Encora, and we're really pleased with what we've been able to achieve together. A little bit of background about Teletracking, just so you have some context about who we are and how that might be useful for the problems that we solve, and how our relationship with Encora is beneficial to solving those problems. Teletracking Technologies is Teletracking Technologies is an integrated healthcare operations platform company. We expand the capacity to care by providing a solution set to our users, clients, however you look at it, to optimize the access to care, streamline the delivery of care, and then connect those care transitions. What does that mean? It means that Teletracking Technologies basically is a healthcare operations efficiency company. I actually use the term logistics. We are very much like an Amazon or a FedEx in terms of logistics. Our focus is on the package being the patient and not a box or not a good that's sold. Our job is to basically get that patient through the health system as efficiently and effectively as possible, while still providing the highest level care. In the U.S., it's very clear in the U.S. that healthcare costs continue to rise. The Affordable Care Act has tried to bring some sense or some reality to that in terms of managing it. But what it's done to health systems is it's maximized or capped out their potential revenue. So if you're having a hip replaced and you know it's going to, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you know it's going to cost $15,000, that's all the Medicare and Medicaid is going to pay for that surgery. So the only way for the healthcare systems to actually improve profit is by reducing costs. And that's where we come in. We manage the length of stay. to ensure that the milestones for discharge are being completed in an accurate and timely way, and that there's no waste in the system. Just to give it a little bit of scale, we work with 200 health systems, the top 3 largest systems in the U.S. and more than 1,000 individual facilities. That means it equates to over 200,000 beds that we manage across the globe, U.S., Canada, and UK, and now we are entering into Germany as well. We operate 100 command centers. A command center is the centralized command that manages patient flow and patient movement and patient access inside of the health system. The health system it used to be that a hospital was a hospital, and each hospital was individually managed and owned. But as these health systems have grown, a health system can have hundreds and hundreds of hospitals as part of their portfolio. So you want to have one. Typically, you want to have one place where you centralize the management of care across all those, so that you can efficiently place patients into the right beds at the right time, at the right location, based off the patient needs. We are what I would consider is, if you think of the EMR being the care delivery mechanism, we are the efficiency platform. So we sit underneath the EMR and work directly with the EMR to manage operational efficiency within the health system. Just to give some ideas about things that are where the wasted in care is, there's all of these add up to opportunities for opportunities to be more efficient. And if you just manage and reduce the length of care, the length of stay in the hospital by a tenth of an hour, or a tenth of a point. So not a tenth of an hour, but by an hour or a tenth of a point. So from 4.2 days to 4.1 days, that could save a health system tens of millions of dollars a year. So just managing efficiently is what we try. Manage that efficiently is what we try to do. But there's a lot of waste that's happening within the system, and the only opportunity for profits to be increased in today's market is by reducing costs. And we think of it's even broader than that. So it's more than just healthcare. It's more than just efficiency wasted in it. There's opportunities there's other opportunities with which we can improve the bottom line for hospitals and health systems. So with that said, I want to get onto our topic, just so you have that background about who I am and about who teletracking is. And hopefully that gives you an understanding about where we're going to come from on these next sets of slides. So in my time at Teletrack and in prior roles as well, I've learned that there's really 2 mechanisms or 2 manners in which you can optimize, form and normalize a team to be efficient and effective in the use case you have. One is by dealing with autonomous engineering autonomous product engineering teams, meaning they are self-contained. Let me go forward now that we have this. Autonomous product engineering team versus a centralized leadership. So think of it in terms of what a product team could be. And then autonomous means they have the right and role to manage everything about their engineering structure. Product management aspects of it, product ownership, engineering leadership, operations, P&L, potentially, depending on your organizational structure. Everything is self-contained within that autonomous team. It runs by itself. It doesn't need anything from anyone else to make it work. Companies that operate at scale like this model because everything is co-located and it's completely independent or mutually exclusive, if you will, from the rest of the organization. You can deliver capability to the product faster, independent of any other part of the organization. Things that actually impact this, the approach are many, right? So on why you might select a centralized product engineering team versus autonomous product engineering. Centralized meaning, obviously, hopefully, the understanding you take that leadership aspect of it and keep it in the central location, typically maybe in the United States, where you have your product management, product ownership, and engineering architects and leaders all in one location in the US. And then you scale your teams out by managing that through more of a decentralized organizational structure, maybe in an offshore model like we do with Encora, bringing that all under one leadership guide so that it's easier to scale out by just focusing on the engineering talent you have, say, in a country like India, but in other parts of the world, and keep your product focus and your leadership in one location, but extend it out to the rest of the organization. The rest of the engineering organization, extend it out to your partners so that they can help you staff that accordingly. The variables that might drive this are things like, what's the cost of making it happen? Location, can you do it via location? Do you have any compliance reasons organizationally, like HIPAA for our sake, or if you're in the U.S. government Department of Defense, can you do this appropriately using a structure like this? Speed to value, speed to market, all those things are variables that may make you choose one of these options versus another. Moving on to autonomous product engineering, as I said, these engineering groups are basically self-contained. They function and form everything and make decisions about tooling, about process, about product, about service structure, about deployment capability, about operational capability. They can make their own decisions. They can drive their own technology and product requirements, and they can deliver on their own time frame, independent of any of the other autonomous engineering teams. They might have some relationships, but really they're functioning independently. Things that actually attributes that you could identify as things that make an autonomous engineering team very effective, or in general just exist. You have your self-contained leadership, as I discussed. They have the ability to make their own decisions about capability and technology direction. That's key. They have a very specific business focus, and that business focus is always there. It's always the same. They are governed by organizational enterprise standards, such as process, technology, and tooling, but they don't have the requirements for how they do that. So, for instance, every organization in your autonomous engineering team might use Bitbucket or a Git repository management system like GitHub or GitLab, but there's no requirement for how they manage that within. They may also be required to build tools using, a standard build processes like maybe Jenkins or even, AWS pipelines, for example. So you can standardize in terms of the technologies, but you let them have the ability to determine whether or not they want to use an application server versus, Kubernetes environment for clustering versus and scale. Many different ways in which the solution can be defined, but you limit them. You leave that to their ideas. Let them have that control. This works well for organizations that want to push P&L responsibility down to the lowest level. If you do so you can have an organizational structure where you have a set of autonomous engineering teams that may report up to or have P&L responsibility, but report up to a P&L team leader who may have more 1A teams associated with them, but they're still responsible for P&L. It's not P&L at the highest level. These tend to be more costly to operate just because there's some redundancy in people's. It scales better, it scales consistently, but there may be some redundant labor or redundant people. So you have to make sure that you have enough responsibility within that autonomous engineering team for it to be able to scale in a cost-effective way. Typically, they're co-located. Because they're co-located, it's not always the case, but typically they're co-located. Because of that co-location, I think there is an increased ability to collaborate just because of proximity. They tend to move faster to market because they have all the responsibility. They're not waiting around for some other person in the organization to give them a set of requirements or make a certain decision. They can make those decisions as they come, as fast as they come, and they can then direct things more agilely with more agility they are able to execute against those decisions that they make. I think you want to limit or not have many interdependencies in order for this team to be the most effective. That's why that picture on the side shows that there may be some independence, but they're not completely. There may be some dependencies, but they're not completely dependent upon other things. They may use a tool or a service that comes from another team, but they're really not dependent on them for a set of requirements or anything of that nature. And they rely heavily, and this is the key here, that you have the concept of a composable enterprise. What does that mean? Composable enterprise is that as you build up capability, the capability is independently deployable or composable, in that each thing that you compose can be used to create something different or something new, or it could be part of just a general overall direction. So if you have a set of services in a service line that you want to isolate to an AE team, so to an autonomous engineering team, you can isolate that pretty straightforward and be able to execute, if you will, in a way that allows what they build to be used by somebody else, and then what somebody else is building can be used by them, but they're not dependent in terms of contractual arrangements or release schedules or anything of that nature. So if you have a composable enterprise where everything is completely composed, meaning you have services that sit on UIs that sit on top of services that sit on top of data, and they're all completely self-contained, then you can make this happen with very lean, very focused teams in using autonomous engineering teams. Centralized leadership is pretty straightforward. You have your leadership in one location, but then you manage out your scale by using engineering teams that can be co-located, or they can be anywhere in the world, and work directly with them. We use this model primarily here at Teletracking because it's easier for us to create we're more closely located to our clients, and we have a better understanding at the centralized leadership what we're looking to build and how we're looking to build it. And so we have to manage those requirements across the entirety of the engineering team, which becomes more of a challenge for us, without a doubt. And it's not necessarily my preferred mechanism, but it's the best mechanism for the size of company and the type of company Teletracking is. Autonomous engineering teams we used while I was at Amazon, and I prefer that model. But that model scales great. But its negative is that it can be more costly to organizations. So it's just something you have to be able to balance based off of your own use case. Attributes of a centralized leadership team is that all product management, product ownership, experience design, quality is kind of in operations or kind of at a high level at one location, and the product engineering teams are comprised primarily of software engineers that are scaled across wherever your geographical areas that you're working with Encora on. Our product teams are in India with centralized leadership, usually onshore in the US, as I discussed. Our centralized leadership teams typically have leaders that work on multiple product engineering teams. So you may have a director or manager who has multiple product engineering teams, and they're providing capability to all of them. Same way with experienced design or your UX experts. They are working across multiple product engineering teams, providing capability across all of them. The rest of the capability from a software standpoint may be co-located between both your onshore full-time employees as well as your offshore partner employees. There has to be very clear and concise communication when you have centralized product teams, because you're distributing out the work across multiple organizations. So they need to know exactly what you're doing, and it has to be very clear and very precise. The requirements can't be answered because there's a product flow, and sometimes there's time differences and things of that nature that you have to adapt to or adhere to. So when you have an autonomous engineering team, it's all about doing the communication very quick and very concise, very close-knit and concise. Whereas when you have disjointed teams, if you will, centralized product leadership teams, you have to make sure that you have documentation, concise collaboration and concise communications with your team, because you don't want to lose any time issues or anything of that nature. You want to make sure everybody's working on the right things at the right time at all times. And because that collaboration does tend to be more of a challenge, they tend to move slower than autonomous engineering teams, because decisions have to be made, and those decisions have to be made across a larger, more centralized group. And so it's more difficult to make those decisions, in my opinion, than it is to let a team who's just fully responsible for everything as an autonomous engineering team would be, to fully make those decisions about everything, requirements, technology, whatever it might be. It works equally well if you have a monolithic architecture versus a composable enterprise. So that's something to consider. If you have a monolith, this approach can function. It also can function in a composable enterprise. When you talk about autonomous engineering teams, that's not the case. They tend to they require that composable enterprise to be really effective. This really works well when your offshore team provides you the focus of your offshore team is to provide you technical talent. I mean, if you're dealing with if you're working with Encora and you're trying to build a capability with Encora, it's a different approach, because Encora can bring all that capability to the team. But when your domain is like ours, and it's kind of very difficult if you're not part of, say the U.S. healthcare market, it's more of a challenge to be able to have that autonomous team or that decentralized team functioning. So this works well when you have this type of model where you have your onshore your onshore leadership and your offshore engineering team. And when a company like Encora that you're working with can provide that talent for you, it really does work well. It does work well together. So that's the two primary approaches. I'm sure there's others people have thought of, but this throughout my career, that's the two that I think have been the most effective that I've been able to work with. Now, moving forward, it's all about the technology that you use to make that happen. So, I'm just listing out the technologies that we use here so that you can see them. But reality is, it's very important that you bring to the table the technologies that make sense for the use cases that you're doing, especially when you're talking about building a very collaborative environment and a very communicative environment across miles, across oceans, for that matter. So you need to have good collaboration and agile management tools. We use Atlassian Stack, and then we leverage Slack. These are probably not any tools that are new to anybody here, but just bringing it to attention to what we tend to like and use as a SaaS product. Obviously, focus in favor of SaaS just because it's easier to deploy across the two teams or the different organizations. You need to have clean and good incident response, so that if you have, regardless of the team structure, you want to make sure that when something bad happens, the right person is being made aware to fix something that bad happened. So we leverage Opsgenie and StatusPage to give our outward appearance, Opsgenie to drive internal workflow, to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the timeframes of our SLAs and SLOs and SLIs. We follow a scaled agile framework internally, but we really make sure that we try, because that distributed organization, centralized leadership, and distributed engineering team, we bring together the teams on a quarterly basis and do program increment planning, which is basically what are we going to try to accomplish over the next quarter. But yeah, we deliver software every 2 weeks at a minimum. And we try to deliver way more than that into production. We had about 800 production releases in 2022. In my opinion, for this to function well, I mean, you have to have a mentality of building around APIs. So an API first mentality is what drives the composable enterprise. We leverage Nginx for both data and control planes. Our continuous delivery model is basically completely automated pipeline, soup to nuts, what we call the paved road. We leverage that with leverage the Spinnaker, SonarQube, and other technologies like that for SAST and DAST and then testing all within the pipeline. But we go from a pull request being merged through a build cycle, a test and deployment cycle that eventually finds its way to production without any human in the loop. Our goal is always to have a production deployment be something that is just happens, because we're confident that if it doesn't work, we have the ability to roll back to the prior version quickly. So ability to roll back is, again, a feature. Enable A/B testing at any level. This allows teams to be able to be nimble in terms of, hey, I want to test this versus this, but I don't know which one's better. Okay, we'll enable that. Build an infrastructure, a platform that allows for that to be easy. So we leverage Launch Darkly, and we manage from an enterprise standpoint, we manage that concept down to each individual team. We like the concept of service line organizational structure. So we have teams that own service lines. Those service lines are composed of services, and that's what they build and operate. If you read the book Team Topologies, it's a great book. It'll give you a good understanding about just how to organize or reorganize yourself around the concept of service lines. I think they do a good historical analysis of Spotify, the music streaming company, and how they have created themselves around it. How they keep rediscovering and reinventing themselves, but that book does a really good job of trying to give you their perspective, and not just their perspective, but there's several organizations within that follow that same concept, including Amazon. Measure all production components, SLIs, to ensure the SLOs are being achieved. We use Grafana Cloud. You could use anything in that space, but make sure that is being, because you're going to hold those teams accountable to the things that they want to measure. So our definition of done for service is that it's completely observable against the business metrics, the system metrics, and the application metrics that are important to that organization or to that service. So you can't put something into production unless it has that. So Grafana Cloud is our tool to measure that. You can use Datadog, you can use New Relic, whatever the technology of choice yours is. But we feel that helps the teams achieve their goals in terms of the their participation in the 99.9% currently uptime that we have to have, in moving toward 99.99% uptime. We do defense in depth leveraging our AWS tools as well as Asset Node. Asset Node is a asset inventory discovery platform that then can also do testing on those in real time to determine if there's any vulnerabilities against those assets. We push new assets into production on a regular basis. So we like having a tool that can discover those assets in real time and determine whether or not that asset has any vulnerabilities, and then continue to discover whether that happens. Because we do so many production pushes, we need to know whether or not all this the production environment is a good, stable, secure environment. I'm a big proponent of automation. Everything must be automated. Automation first. I don't care what it is. You have to have automation in place. Build something. Don't manually do things over and over again. That's why we have software engineers. So do your job. Terraform, Ansible, Python, Bash, these are all tools at the disposal of those team members. We're really not all that, what I call, we're a polyglot organization. You need to be able to pick up the right language and the right tool to do the right job. So be comfortable with what that is. And then build for self-service. Just build your platform for self-service. This is a goal that I think is important just in general. But having your autonomous engineering team or your centralized product leadership teams, thinking about self-service as a model enables them to get out of the ability to have to manage that thing that they're building on behalf of the users. So build it into it so that the users can do what they need to do it themselves. So these are some of the most important things about bringing it all together in my mind from a technology and process standpoint that enables you to operate, whether it's an autonomous engineering team or whether it's a centralized product leadership team. It allows you to bring the best out of either of those teams and either of those organizational structures so that you can have consistent quality delivery in a timely fashion. And that's it. I really appreciate everybody's time today. It was a great discussion for me. Hopefully you learned something out of this. If not, I'm sure you'll make comments. Otherwise, I'm really privileged and happy to be here.
Perfect. Yes, it was a great session. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. I particularly enjoyed that final slide of your tooling list. I think it's an excellent sort of cheat sheet for how to effectively scale and manage remote product engineering teams, regardless of the approach one might choose. It's funny to me that you've actually been working with Encora longer than I have. I've passed the 7-year mark, and you're nearing the 10. I think that's great. I'm curious, what was it that made you, as a CTO, opt for the centralized product engineering approach for your company?
It really came down to we're not a scaled large enough organization that I would consider scaling an autonomous engineering approach. If we hit certain revenue numbers, a certain scale in terms of engineering numbers, then I would consider it changing us to that model. It's just really came down to what is the most cost effective given where we are as an organization.
All right, and that makes sense. And for those leaders out there who are considering perhaps looking for nearshore, offshore partnerships, what are some of your do's and don'ts for them?
Oh God, there's so many organizations I'm sure as everybody knows, and there's a lot of things that a lot of companies that say they'll bring things to your table. Whether it's we'll do it for you, we will hire them, we will do everything soup to nuts. You don't have to worry about anything. That doesn't float well with me. I want to make sure that my Encora team or my partner is equally as engaged into this and is equally committed to this as I am, and that's one of the reasons why we love Encora. But secondly, and most importantly for me, it's that Encora enables us or allows us to participate in the process of selecting our engineers. So it's not just about Encora saying, hey, here's 5 engineers, we just scaled your team by 5 engineers. It's, hey, we want to scale the team by 5 engineers. Let's work together to figure out who those 5 best engineers that you can bring to the table are. And so that process is huge, and not every company does that. And probably from a third standpoint, especially in our selection in Encora and why we like Encora so much, is that Encora structures their organization. And for those who haven't been to Bangalore to see Encora, I highly recommend that. But they structure the teams in such a way that you don't really get a sense of necessarily that they're Encora employees, but that they're teletracking employees. And that really means a lot to me. It makes me feel like the employees are part of our team. And we have employees that have been with us the entirety of the time, and even prior to Encora. But we have employees Encora employees who have been with us for the entirety of the time that we've been with Encora. That's hard to say and hard to think about in most any of the other companies that follow the same model. That's why we like working with Encora.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to choose a partner that really is people first. So that gives you that longevity, that long-term relationship. I always say it's important to be product focused and not project focused. And I think a lot of the communication tooling and tips that you outlined help do that, right? To be focused on the product. This was great. So for those of you watching, thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, you can leave any more comments or questions for Mike here on the page, and he'll go ahead and answer those and chime in, of course. And yeah, thank you, Mike, once again. Thank you for joining us, audience. It's our hope that you'll go ahead and be able to join us all along the Encora Dev Week. You can check out upcoming sessions on our official website, which is devweek.encora.com. You can also check us out on our socials, which you see right down there, or simply stick around because our next session is coming right up. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.